Are we ready to begin? Thank you very much, everybody, ladies and gentlemen, for being here. Thank you to members of the media and also my ministerial colleagues and our executive leadership as well. Just at the start, I might ask everybody to just go around and introduce themselves. I'm Senator Sam Messon, Minister for Children.
Mark Rogers, Director General for Children, Young People, Education and Skills.
John Conroy, Achievements.
Susan Devlin, Group Director, Children's Services.
So today the Jersey Care Commission have released their report into leading on from the inspection of children's services which took place earlier this year. Hopefully most of you have had a chance to read that report and digest some of it. I just want to start by thanking the Jersey Care Commission for everything that they've done. We now have a report before us which serves as another stark reminder of the progress that we really need to make in Jersey to ensure that our children's services meet the needs of the people they serve. So we now have to study that report and incorporate its recommendations into the State of Jersey's work programme, and we can say that this is an absolute top priority for this government. The report is absolutely not a glowing report by any stretch, but it does make clear some of the areas that Jersey has been failing in and helps us understand some of the work that we need to do to improve it. The Council of Ministers were briefed on the Care Commission report yesterday, and we can confirm that we accept all of the findings and recommendations of this report, and we will have to produce obviously a more substantive and detailed response as we have time. I just wanted to start by making some observations of the report, and then I'll ask Mark to talk a bit about the improvement plan which the Council of Ministers agreed a few months ago. I think the most important part of the report for me is on page 4. It's one of the bullet points at the very top, which says whole system change is required so that Jersey becomes a place in which social workers choose to come because they know they will have the right conditions to carry out their work and the political and corporate support to do so. And it speaks of how that this simply hasn't existed in Jersey for too long. 3 areas that struck me in the report that we need to deal with. The first was on corporate parenting. This is something I'll come back to a little bit later as we talk about the pledge. It also spoke about the information that's shared between different state services and how children are being let down. People are being forced to retell their stories so many times and feel that they can't really trust the system as a result of that. And it also spoke about the real problems there are with recruitment and retention to our children's services, and that's something that there's going to have to be a cross-department response to. So Mark, I don't know if you want to say anything at this point about the improvement plan and what's happened in recent months.
Thank you. So I'd like to restate the Minister's encouraging comments about the report. So we welcome what the Care Commission has had to say, and the recommendations will be invaluable in reframing our improvement plan. So you will know back in July when we'd had the benefit of a 1-year-long report on the care inquiry, and we knew at least importantly what Ofsted thought of our children's services, that we wrote a new improvement plan. That plan was designed to last for 3 months so that we could update it as a consequence of the Care Commission making its report. So that's what we'll be doing in the next few weeks. I think the most important thing to say is this, that a plan is just a plan. What's going to make the difference is the reason you're here today, which is a renewed commitment from all of the Assembly and from the public service to putting children first, because it's that commitment will actually turn the plan from words into reality. Now, the plan itself is grounded in some well understood issues. There are 5 areas that we are focusing on, and perhaps most obviously the most important of which is ensuring we've got a stable workforce, a really good, high quality set of social workers and other professionals who are able to do to the very best of their ability every day of the week, every month of the year, top quality social work. So that's our number 1 priority, is to get that workforce stable and high performing. We also, though, having just said that the most important thing is to prioritise children, we're also really clear that in all the work that we do, the voice of the child matters more than anything else. So we need to continue the process of getting better and better at listening to children and young people, taking their views into account and actually involving them. It's not just listening, it's involving them in some of the changes that we need to make. So that what we do, they recognise, support and find useful to themselves. In all of this, we want to make sure actually that we head off difficulties in the first place. So you'll be familiar with the phrase prevention and early help. We're going to make a renewed effort to be better at doing those two things. Because actually nobody wants children and young people to find themselves in difficulty. And what we want to do is give them the support they need in their families as early as possible. So that's a kind of key third area that we've been looking at. You will know, though, that for some children, it's just not possible for some of their lives, sometimes for a long period of their lives, to live in their birth family. So we've got to get better at having a variety of placements that are available to them, fostering, we would call that, wouldn't we? But sometimes also we need to look at adoption options. We want to make sure that the island offers everything that it's possible to offer in a place of this size, so that children and young people, if they can't grow up for a period of time in their own family, can still do so in the community or near to the communities where they were born and grew up. And then finally, and I think this session today is an example of it, we just need to improve our transparency around our performance. So I think it is well understood, isn't it, how Jersey's Children's Services are performing and the progress that they need to make to get to good and then outstanding. We want to be really clear that that journey is one that's seen in public. There's nothing to hide, so our performance in particular will be something that we want to report upon. And the improvement plan is really clear that we will hold ourselves to account with the public by making public how we're doing in terms of the progress. So I think at this stage that's probably all I should say. I'm sure there will be questions at some point later on, but be assured we have a very clear improvement plan that's already being implemented. The Care Commission's recommendations are enormously helpful. They have a strong resonance with what we're already doing. So the next version of that improvement plan will take into account what they have said, following due consideration of their recommendations by the Council of Ministers, senior officials, and I guess in due course, starting next week in the Assembly. Thank you.
So it's pretty clear for all of us to see that if Jersey is going to become an island where every single child and young person is able to thrive and be happy, we are all going to have to go on a journey, not just the government but the whole of our community. So the first few recommendations in the report talk about corporate parenting, and it says that we need to develop and implement a statutory framework for corporate parenting, as this is not something that we've done well over recent years. When the Care and Fire report first came out, I sort of struggled with this idea. Corporate parent, it's got this word corporate in front of it, which isn't a very friendly word. You know, what does it really mean, and how is a government meant to play that role? How is a community meant to play that role? And so I think that not just reforming our legislation in this area, but we have to win people's hearts and minds to understand that every one of us in our community has a role to play in securing the well-being of children. Not just the government, the media has a role to play, businesses have a role to play, we all have a role to play. And so today we wanted to take some of the first steps there by unveiling our pledge for Jersey's children and young people, putting children first. This, I should stress, is not a knee-jerk reaction from the Care Commission report. This is something that we've been working on for some time, but I think when we're having a conversation about corporate parenting, and this is as good a time as any to reveal it, this is the Government of Jersey, the State's Assembly and the executive leadership in Jersey putting clear our pledge to put Jersey's children first, and specifically outline some of the things that this will involve. There's 8 parts of this pledge. I won't go through all of them because they're up there, but just to highlight a couple of them. One of the pledges is about ensuring there's sufficient funding available to be effective in our regulation and legislative changes. I think that's really important because it means we can't do what governments often get accused of, which is trying to look good rather than actually doing good. And this is one way that we will be forced to make real our commitments. We speak about publishing clear standards to be held to account for them. I think that's really important, because what we can't do is fall back into where we have been previously, which is where governments often come up with excuses for their failings rather than actually holding their hands up and committing to dealing with those failings instead. This pledge can be a basis from which we can be held to account for how we move forward. And I hope that those who sign it will recognise that this is all of our responsibilities. It's not just the responsibility of one minister to deal with something. It's not the responsibility of the government, because backbench states members have a role, and it's not the job of our executive leadership to not understand the full implications of their actions and how those are going to impact on children. What we will do after signing this and presenting it to states members is we will want to have some sort of outreach programme with the wider community to help them understand the principles here, start speaking to businesses, and I think it's fair to say that there is some good practice actually out there in a lot of businesses who are doing good things to improve how children interact with them and how families interact. At this point I would like to kick us off by asking the Chief Minister if he'd like to stand up and be the first to sign our Children's Pledge. I'll then ask other ministerial colleagues to do the same, leaders of our executive, and then we can take some questions from there. Serve as a permanent reminder when members are in the building and taking part in debates, as a reminder that children should always be at the forefront of our minds, whatever decisions we're making in the Assembly. So that being said, to offer the chance for any questions, if anyone has anything they'd like to ask of any of us.
This is all well and good, this pledge that you've signed here, the A pledge sort of thing. Looking at it, it's how is any of it measurable? What you said you're going to do and what all the rest of it. there's no, how do you say we're going to be held to account? How are you going to be held to account? How is any of your 8 pledges measurable?
I think that's a good question, and I hope that it's a question that we're consistently asked, because now that we've made this public commitment and been so clear about it, we are now in a situation where we will have to justify every measure we do, and we will have other states members, the media, members of the public able to say to us, well, you've signed up to this, so when you are bringing forward another measure under the improvement plan, or whether we bring forward the MTFP or a budget, we will have to justify it against this and explain why what we are doing is in line with what we've pledged to Jersey's children and young people. And I think it's fair to say that that this pledge, we will be in breach of it right away, because there are, as we know from this report, there are areas that we are currently failing. This is part of that journey, so we may never be fully compliant with this pledge. It's about our ambition, and it's about saying these are the criteria by which we want to be measured against. People will have their own subjective view on that. People may have different interpretations of how you would fulfil this pledge. But I hope, as Children's Minister, I hope that I'm put under pressure in the States Assembly from other members who will say to me, well, you've pledged that you were going to do X, Y and Z. Why haven't you done this yet? Why is it taking so long to do this? Where's the funding going to come for this? And those will and should be difficult questions, and I will have to do my best to argue them, and it will provide a framework for people challenging me and challenging all of us if we don't deliver on it. And I think that public statement hasn't existed before, and I think it can only be a positive thing that we have it now.
And just quickly, with the signatures, you said you're going to put it in the States members' room. So are you going to be, I don't know if naming and shaming is the right word, but will you be holding, people might refuse to sign this. Are we going to know who has signed it and who hasn't, especially in the way of elected representatives?
Absolutely. I think, Pledge 8 is about publishing our clear standards and being held to account for it. I want this to be updated regularly for the public so they can see this and know what it looks like and see who has signed it. And if people don't want to sign it, they'll have to justify why. And we'll have to listen to why they're not signing it, and we will have to try to convince them that it is worth signing it. It's not necessarily about naming and shaming people, but we will have to try to justify it to those who haven't been convinced yet. And we may have to do that because this concept of a corporate parent isn't necessarily understood by everybody. And the reports have pointed this out, and it's been my experience speaking to others that not everybody seems to realise that it's their responsibility to look out for Jersey's children too. Until now, the position has been that the corporate parent has been the Health and Social Services Minister, when in actual fact it's all of us, and so it's the Chief Minister, public service leaders, all states members, and it's going to be difficult explaining that to people, but it will be part of that necessary culture change we've got to make, so that there is nobody working in our public service who thinks that this isn't their responsibility and they can just ignore things. That may be difficult, but that culture change is absolutely necessary. Not just the legislative changes mentioned in the report, but that culture change as well.
Will you put the pledge up online and so we can see who signed it and who hasn't signed it?
Yes.
Thanks.
I suppose the message I would say is that, if you like the expressions or not, it's the government, it's the parliament, and it's the public service are united in wanting to significantly improve matters. What it means basically that children's services aren't being left by themselves, and it's no longer somebody else's problem. It's all of our problems to make sure matters get better. That sort of sums up the position, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense, thanks.
Anybody else? If nobody wants to ask questions in this forum, we can do interviews or answer questions separately. Final chance, but if not, thank you everyone for attending. Thank you colleagues who've been here and shown their commitment by signing in public. We'll be around if anyone else wants to ask any other questions. Thank you.